If you've seen headlines like New 2026 Traffic Stop Rule, say this or you can be arrested, here's the scary truth. There is no single nationwide 2026 rule that suddenly changes what every driver in America must say, but there is something very real behind the viral claim, and it's what gets everyday people jammed up during routine stops. The difference between what you are legally required to provide, what you should say to protect yourself, and what you should never say because it can be used against you later. And the real catch most drivers don't realize, the words you choose in the first 30 seconds can quietly decide whether this is a 2-minute warning or a night in jail. So let's talk about what the rule actually is, why it matters right now, the exact phrases that keep you safe, and the common lines that can sink you without you even noticing. Now, quick reminder, I'm not your attorney. This is general information, and laws vary by state. But the fundamentals of traffic stops and your constitutional rights are the same reason so many lawyers and civil rights groups keep repeating the same advice every year. Because most arrests on traffic stops don't start with some big crime. They start with the mouth moving too fast. Here's what people mean when they say, the new 2026 traffic stop rule. It's not a brand new federal statute. It's a cultural shift. More departments using body cams, more courts relying on body cam audio, more aggressive consent search requests, and more drivers unknowingly giving officers the one thing they need to escalate, either consent, probable cause, or a statement that sounds like an admission. And when you combine that with state-by-state rules on identification, signature requirements on citations, and the simple fact that traffic stops are inherently stressful, it creates the same outcome over and over. Drivers think they're being polite, but legally, they're building the case. According to the ACLU's guidance on being stopped by police, you should stay calm, avoid volunteering extra information, and remember you have the right to remain silent in many situations, because what you say can be used in reports in court later. That's not paranoia. That's how the system works. Source. Now, why does this matter right now? Because traffic stops have become more than license and registration. Officers may ask questions that feel casual, where you're coming from, whether you've had anything to drink, whether there's anything illegal in the car, whether they can just take a quick look. And the trap is that these questions are designed to get one of three things. 1, consent to search. 2, probable cause through your words. Or 3, inconsistent statements they can later describe as suspicious. NPR's Life Kit laid this out clearly. The safest move is not to volunteer information beyond what is strictly necessary. And if an officer asks to search, you should verbally assert that you do not consent, because casual wording can confuse people into giving permission they never meant to give. Source. That's the 2026 rule people are reacting to. The idea that you must speak precisely, on camera, in a way that protects you. So what do drivers must say? Let's split this into what you're required to provide and what you should say to protect yourself. First, the required part. If you're driving and you're stopped, you generally must provide your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance when asked. If you don't, you're not standing up for your rights. You're often handing them a lawful reason to escalate. Even civil rights guides that strongly emphasize the right to remain silent also say that during a car stop, if you were driving, you should show license, registration, and proof of insurance. Source. And here's where people get burned. They start arguing on the roadside about whether the stop is legitimate, whether the officer is allowed to ask, whether they feel like providing anything. That's not the courtroom. That's the side of the road. Second, the protective phrases, the ones that keep you from accidentally consenting, confessing, or escalating. This is the single clean sentence that matters most when the conversation starts drifting into fishing expedition territory. I'm going to remain silent. Not rude, not emotional, not combative, just clear. The ACLU's own stopped by police guidance emphasizes that you have the right to remain silent and that you should say you wish to remain silent. Source. And if they start pressing you with questions that feel casual but are actually investigative, Like, you don't have anything illegal in here, right? This is where people talk themselves into a disaster. Because here's the brutal reality: even saying, no, I don't, can lead to the next question. So, you don't mind if I take a quick look? Now you're in consent territory. So, the phrase you need, calmly, clearly, like you've said it before, is, I do not consent to a search. NPR's Life Kit specifically warns that officers may ask in casual ways, can I look in your bag? Can you pop your trunk? And if you're exercising your rights, you must verbally assert you do not consent. Source. And yes, you might be thinking, if I say no, won't that make me look guilty? Maybe, but looking guilty is not the same as giving them legal permission. The officer's job is to gather facts. Your job is to not accidentally donate facts. Now, the third phrase that can save you time, money, and your dignity is simple. Am I free to leave? NPR describes the idea that there are different levels to police interactions, conversation versus detention, and that you can ask whether you're free to leave. Source. That question matters because a lot of traffic stops quietly morph into just a few more questions. And you can feel it happening. The ticket is already written, or the warning is already given, but the officer is still standing there talking. The real catch most drivers don't realize: you can accidentally extend the stop by turning it into a debate or by answering questions that aren't required. So you anchor yourself with that one sentence: am I free to leave? Now let's talk about what drivers absolutely must not say during a traffic stop, because this is the part where most people accidentally destroy their own situation. And I'm serious when I say this. The most viral arrest videos you see online usually don't start because the driver had something illegal in the car. They start because the driver got nervous, started talking too much, and unknowingly gave the officer exactly what they needed to escalate the stop. People panic. They want to sound cooperative. They want to seem honest. But in that moment, one careless sentence can turn a simple traffic ticket into a full investigation. The first dangerous mistake is when drivers volunteer information that sounds harmless, but is actually an admission. Lines like, I only had 2 drinks, or I'm probably okay, or it was a few hours ago, may feel like you're being transparent, but legally, you are giving the officer a reason to suspect impairment. Those words can justify sobriety testing, extended questioning, and even a search. The second major mistake is giving accidental consent without realizing it. When an officer asks, mind if I take a look? And you respond with, yeah, sure, or go ahead, or even, I guess so, that is not casual conversation. That is legal permission. And once consent is given, you can't undo it. That's why what you say in those first few seconds matters more than most drivers ever realize. Do what you need to do. NPR has specifically warned that police officers may ask for consent in a way that sounds casual or harmless, especially during stressful traffic stops. The problem is that many drivers are already nervous, confused, or overwhelmed in that moment, and they may agree to something without fully realizing what they are giving up. A request like, do you mind if I take a quick look, can feel like small talk, but legally it can open the door to a full search. NPR explains that consent is often obtained when people are flustered and trying to be cooperative, not because they truly understand the consequences. That's why it's so important to recognize that even polite sounding questions during a stop can carry serious legal weight. Another major danger comes from what people say next, especially when they lie out of panic. Statements like, I wasn't speeding, I don't know why you pulled me over, or I didn't see that sign may seem harmless, but they can backfire quickly if the officer already has evidence such as radar readings, dashcam footage, or a clear reason for the stop. In that situation, the lie itself becomes an additional problem, turning a minor traffic issue into something more serious. The ACLU NorCal guide is very direct about this. One of the biggest don'ts during a police encounter is simply don't lie. If you don't want to answer questions, you always have the right to remain silent, but providing false information can escalate the situation. And what many people underestimate is that the consequences can go beyond just a ticket. In certain circumstances, refusing lawful orders, physically resisting, or even refusing to sign a citation in some states can create a lawful basis for arrest. Importantly, signing a citation is usually not an admission of guilt. It is often just a promise to appear in court, but misunderstanding that moment can lead to serious outcomes. The ACLU NorCal guide flat out warns, don't refuse to sign a ticket. You can be arrested for it. Source. And here's the gut punch. Even if you did nothing criminal, a stop can still turn into handcuffs if an officer believes you are obstructing, refusing required identification as a driver, or escalating the interaction. That's why the must-say concept spreads online. People sense something true. Language can be the difference between going home and going to jail. Now let's get into real legal examples or quotes, without turning this into a law school lecture. One of the most repeated phrases in civil rights materials is the idea that you should explicitly invoke your rights out loud. Not just think them, not just imply them, actually say them. The ACLU's national stopped by police guidance includes, say you wish to remain silent and ask for a lawyer immediately in arrest or detention contexts, and emphasizes that you have the right to remain silent. Source NPR echoes the same idea from a reporting and legal education angle. If you opt out of a search, it's crucial you verbally assert you do not consent, because the moment can be confusing and consent can be inferred. Source. That's not internet folklore. That's mainstream, lawyer-reviewed public guidance. Now, how does this affect everyday drivers across the US? It affects the soccer mom who thinks being chatty is cooperating. It affects the college kid who thinks sarcasm is standing up for myself. It affects the working guy driving home late who thinks explaining his entire night will clear things up, because the stop is not a therapy session. It's an evidence collection environment, and the reason you feel like you need to explain is human. Silence feels suspicious, but legally, silence is often protection. So what do you do next? Like practically, if you want to protect yourself the next time those lights come on behind you. You rehearse 3 sentences now while you're calm, so you can say them later, while your heart is pounding. You hand over your required documents. You keep your hands visible. You don't argue the reason for the stop on the roadside. And when the conversation shifts into fishing, you switch into simple, respectful, repetitive language. I'm going to remain silent. I do not consent to a search. Am I free to leave? If you want the one phrase every driver needs, the one that stops people from accidentally talking themselves into trouble, it's this. I'm not going to answer any questions without a lawyer. And if that feels too intense for a basic stop, shorten it to, I'm going to remain silent. Because the goal is not to win a debate. The goal is to get home safely without donating a case against yourself. And one more thing, this part matters. Even if you do everything right, your rights can still be violated. NPR's piece says that if police search anyway, don't resist physically. Save it for court. Source. That's hard to hear, but it's real. Roadside is not where justice happens. Paperwork and courtrooms are where you fight. Now let me end this with something personal, because this isn't just about knowing rights. It's about stress, fear, and how fast a normal day can flip. If you've ever been pulled over and felt your voice change, your hands shake, your brain race, good. That means you're human. So don't rely on improvisation. Rely on a script. If this video helped you, hit like right now. Not for the algorithm, for the next person who's going to get pulled over tonight and has no idea what to say. Subscribe, because I'm going to keep breaking down real-world rules in plain English, the way people actually experience them. And comment your traffic stop story, especially the moment where you realized, oh, the words I used mattered. Because the more we share what really happens out there, the harder it is for bad information, viral panic, and half-truths to control the conversation. Stay safe, stay calm, and remember, on the side of the road, your best weapon is not a perfect argument.